Hello, everyone. I want to thank you for joining. I'm excited today because I get to present with one of my favorite partners, Bridge Digital, and Richie Murray is going to help us today to show how Lucid Link is used to edit remote videos and how Adobe Premiere and other editors can be used to edit those files remotely. And we'll start off. I am Scott Miller with Lucid Link. I'm Director of Business Development. And I've got, as I said, Richie here with Bridge Digital. If you want to go ahead and introduce yourself, Richie and Jeremy.
Sure, thank you, Scott. It's Richie Murray with Bridge Digital, and Jeremy Norwood is going to be helping us with our demo driving the Avid side. Bridge Digital was founded in 2002, and our background has been primarily providing hardware and software solutions for content creators and providers, primarily on-premise solutions. But as the cloud workflows are becoming more popular, we've embraced the cloud workflows fully, and along with our customer base, and we're excited to be working with Lucid Link and providing their solutions to our group.
That's great. Jeremy, you want to take a moment to introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'm Jeremy Norwood, been doing technical work for Richie at Bridge Digital for just over 10 years, and I've been happy to be involved with the Lucid Link side of support and some technical operations. So,
fantastic. So what we're going to do for you folks today, and I see some of our customers and some of our partners, and we're excited to be able to present to you today. Again, I think this is going to be very interesting and fun for everybody. We're going to make this interactive as well. So the agenda for today's webinar is I'm going to start off by giving a quick overview of who we are, what we do, and why we exist. If you look in the chat panel, you can see that we've put in there a URL for Lucid Link download. If you're interested, you can go to the Lucid Link URL and you can download the client. And after I do the overview, Richie's going to do a demonstration of how the editors actually work with Lucid Link, and we're going to show you some demonstrations on how some files can be shared, accessed, and how collaboration can take place. And then at the end, we're going to do Q&A, but along with that Q&A, if you have that client downloaded to your laptop, you'll be able to actually access some of the files with the file space name there, AWS Lucid Link 1 and Bridge Digital Link, and the password is Lucid Link. So again, trying to make this fun and interactive today. Let me just start off with a real high level. Lucid Link is an actual distributed file system that is cloud native. So we designed this to be able to access large files, mitigate latency over distance. So we're not like your typical WAN accelerator or file accelerator. We're not a sync and share type of model. We're not a VDI solution like some of the other solutions you may be available. Our goal was not to try and move data faster, although we do that, but primarily we wanted to try and move less of the data. Therefore, when you use the Lucid Link service, basically what's happening is you're saving a file to object store and you're saving it in a block level format. And you're saving it in a way that we can serve up the metadata to the application by itself. So the application, as you'll see later in the demo here, when you go to open an application, we can take you specifically to that part of the application and stream only the blocks of data within that application that the application is requesting. This allows us to stream blocks on demand as required by the application. We do these in multiple channels and we do it very quickly. But again, the goal is to move less data as well as moving it faster and moving only what we need. So let's go ahead and jump into that, because I don't want you to hear me talk all through this. I want you to see what Richie's going to show you here. So we're going to upload some files and we're going to share them back and forth and let you see exactly how this works with Adobe Premiere Pro and other editors as well, like Avid. So Richie, you want to take it away?
Sure. Jeremy, can you share your screen? We were actually introduced to Lucid Link through one of our media asset management partners, EMAM. They were showing me their workflow and how it relates to making the proxies available all the time across all of these workflows. And at first, I didn't really believe it until I saw it in action, and we basically started working with Scott and his team immediately after we saw how well that worked. What I've learned since then in doing some of our testing and workflow trials and customer deliveries is that Lucid Link works with just about every media and entertainment workflow that is out there. It provides a common mount point and share access point across Mac, Windows, and Linux, no matter where those systems are hosted. So you could be on, like in our scenario, we're working in a small office with Comcast Business 300 internet, so nothing overly fancy. Jeremy happens to be running a Mac-style trash can with 64 gigs of RAM and some local disk, but he's actually mounted the Lucid Link share Avid Media Files MXF folder, as you can see, and he's able to link that content directly and play it directly either from the timeline or from the source. So we've got DNX 145 footage loaded on the timeline, and we are able to play that content basically live. If this content is all hosted in our AWS S3 bucket, but made accessible by the Lucid Link client. So Lucid Link client runs in the foreground. It mounts, in this particular instance, Avid Media Files as the top level mount directory. And you can see the different file sizes. That Michael Jackson video is almost 11 gigs in size. And the components that are playing at any given time, you only receive the blocks around where the play component is, and so that's how it works. Eventually, if you play the whole file or you render the whole file, you'll obviously eventually download the entire piece. But the fact that I can view without downloading the file first is a real big differentiator. One of the things that we're going to do, if you'll hit play again, Jeremy, just to show that it's working. In some instances, we've run into some clients that don't have fast enough internet, and we do also have the ability to work with proxies. So if your internet's not fast enough to support the bit rates that are required, we can simply load a proxy of it. So we generated a Avid compatible proxy, and as far as your ability to edit and work with the content, you can't really tell any difference other than it's literally loads and plays, potentially faster and with less load. Definitely less egress. And then you swap, if after you're done with proxy workflow, you obviously swap to the high res and render. We're also going to export a piece of content that's and create a DNX 145 MXF OP1A file. And so we're just using that as part of the Avid export. So he's going to export that, create that in a file, and then I'm going to, while it's doing the export, Jeremy, can you pull up the Lucid Link file? There we go. So what's happening is the content's written locally to a cache, and it's being streamed multi-threaded as small blocks of content into our S3 bucket. and it tells how much of the data has already been pushed. The export has already happened inside of Avid, but the files themselves are being synchronized into the cloud bucket and made available across everywhere. And if you would, what we could still see, there's a file let to upload. Scott, would you mind pulling up VLC and playing that file?
Yep, be happy to do that. So I'm opening the folder now. Let me share my screen. So you can see here that I've got the folder here. I can go to Lucid Link, and I've got
it
the
was that
folder.
30-second MXF file was the one we just made. Mm-hmm. And so that piece of content obviously is made available quickly. There was no, I used the word synchronization, but that's not really the proper term. It's loading the blocks in a multi-threaded fashion so that the content's being pushed into the cloud quickly. And then as soon as, if you're using the appropriate codec and wrapper, we're using MXF, so that the files can be opened while they're in transit. So that's really important. I'm going to take that same file.
The important thing to note here.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was just going to say, yeah, the important thing to note here is that we're basically sharing these files, and they live in the cloud. So once they go to the Lucid Link file system, we can have any public storage or private object storage on the background, or in the back end. And once we store them there, that's where the files live. So we're editing these from where they are, and we're pulling them down to the editor, basically a block at a time as required. And that's how I'm in California, Richie's on the East Coast. Obviously, we can play these files back and forth and share them seamlessly.
So is my screen shared? Okay.
Yes, you are.
Great, excellent. So I've got Adobe Premiere pulled up. I am looking at that same location. I'm on a different Mac. Obviously, it happens to be in the same building, but literally could be anywhere in the world. The Lucid Link client is running and made available to me. It looks like a directory structure. I have it mounted as a different name than, so I can force it to be mounted as a particular directory structure or naming convention. So lots of options in the way that the files get mounted, and it obviously can be mounted as /volumes on a Mac. It can be a drive letter on a Windows workstation or server, and a mount point on a Linux box also. Once the content is, that piece of content that Jeremy made available is now available to me, and I can play. Again, I'm playing the high bitrate files from, this is again DNX 145. I've got about 300 megabit down as part of our Comcast business package, and I'm able to play this content without any delay. Obviously, if my internet's not fast enough, that's again where we would recommend using Adobe Media Encoder as a way to create proxies. Adobe Media Encoder obviously comes as a part of the Creative Cloud. But because Adobe offers so many third-party solutions that provide Adobe Premiere Panel plugins, there are several asset management systems that can help automate the ability to create content, find content, create proxies, and link those proxies, and even relink back to the high res, all while using Lucid Link as the repository for the high bit rate, the repository for the proxies, and also a destination for content. So our customer base has been using this as a mechanism for long-term storage. It's made for for file delivery as a common denominator place. It's also a place for a share, so that people outside the organization can gain access to their content that's in an S3 bucket in the cloud or S3 compatible bucket. We happen to be using AWS because we have a relationship with AWS already. And this is, in my opinion, the lowest common denominator of how you might use Lucid Link as a source for edited content and a destination for exported content in both Avid and Adobe. And it's not very, media management is not very exciting in and of itself, but the fact that this content is infinitely scalable and located safely outside of my building and is accessible by anybody with a Lucid Link client and a username and password, it's a pretty powerful solution. And Scott, maybe you can give some reference to how it's billed, the cost, and how that might work.
Sure. I do think it's important to mention, as you said, that we have a number of options available in terms of the different asset management systems. We work with a number of systems out there, Iconic and Kino and EMAM. As you mentioned EMAM early, Richie, they've been working with us for many years, and the systems are able to access the Lucid Link local mount point as if it were a local NAS, and they can facilitate the same kind of collaboration between folks using the same asset management system and the same editing tools. In terms of our cost, it's very simple. We have a cost per capacity, as well as, and it starts out as low as $10 per terabyte per month. So for a beginning system, you can get in and start out for individual users and small, medium-sized companies. Many folks come in and use us at the $10 per terabyte per month. For enterprise solutions, we have other features and functionality that we can layer on top of that and add more value, and we can service a larger number of users, and we can add more features and functionality for those users in multiple locations, and things like snapshotting, so that if you were to accidentally delete a file, you can recover that and mitigate against ransomware and some other things like that, as well as some features around disaster recovery and backups and various other things that we offer. Various integrations with other tools are all available. But again, we wanted to keep the pricing very simple, straightforward, and easy to understand. So we have a very good partner program. So folks like Bridge Digital can basically resell the solution very easily to their customers and offer it as a turnkey solution. And we can bundle in the storage with the solution, or the customer can bring their own storage. So the customer may be using AWS or Azure or some other storage that they have, and they can bring their own storage, use their own access credentials, and integrate the Lucid solution with that. So there's a number of different options there on the storage side, and it's the Lucid Link component plus the storage component.
One use case that we had was we were doing some work in New York and creating some really large files when the COVID hit and we were no longer able to go back on site. We were debugging some lip sync issues with some 20 and 30 gigabyte content files that were being created. And we were able to install Lucid Link on servers, drive content remotely into Lucid Link's directory, and then share that content with our manufacturer partner, who was able to see the issue firsthand without having to fully deliver or try to fully deliver a 22 gig file out of a New York office that I didn't have access to me, or over into some other file delivery solution so that it can end up in Toronto, which was where my software vendor was. So we literally were able to take advantage and save hours of time by using Lucid Link as a common denominator place to look at for review and approval workflow. And for us, it was a very powerful tool. It had nothing to do with production, but file delivery, and my vendor didn't have to download the file to view it. He was able to view it where it sat. And so if you can imagine the amount of time that saved was a very big deal. We're also adding another larger file. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, go ahead, Richie.
Well, we're in the process of adding a 3-minute file into the Lucid Link folder at DNX 145 if any of the attendees are interested in installing that Lucid Link client and connecting to that file space with that username and password. You'll be able to gain access and see for yourself if your internet supports DNX 145, or we could put some other content sizes in there as it relates to your needs, to understand if you could work with a high bit rate or if you needed to make some sort of proxy workflow, both of which are valid.
Yeah, I was just going to say we're seeing similar types of workloads that are being facilitated by our service, in the sense of teams in New York that need to do some editing, and then they need to hand off to teams in LA, for example, without having to ship hard drives or FTP files back and forth. And for example, as you mentioned, you're uploading the file now. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. And is it the 3-minute demo file?
Yes,
Richie?
yes, sir. Yes, sir.
And that's still not finished uploading, correct?
That's correct.
Or is that finished yet?
No, it's not finished.
Well, I'm still, and I'm able to play this even though it's not finished uploading.
That's correct. The file is 3.6. We know the end result is 3.61 gigs. I can see that I have a little over a gig of that file is there. So it will play up to the point of where it runs out of data. But the fact that you can open it while it's still in process is pretty incredible.
Exactly. So that's a use case right there, where we're just seeing the collaboration with folks that are working remotely and in different locations, being able to quickly accommodate what I call the cradle to grave workflow. The files can be ingested into Lucid Link. You can then use Adobe or any of the editors to quickly access and edit those files. They can then be used by a MAM system like EMAM to do approvals and final editing. They can then be distributed from location to other groups, as Richie mentioned. And then finally, when you're done with all the footage and the project's completed, it can be into another Lucid Link destination for active archive. And all of the metadata tagging associated with that throughout the project can remain and put into a different file space for archiving, thereby making it easily accessible again in the future if you need to go back and pull out a small file from that project.
Yeah, it's basically making the cloud into a NAS, and network attached storage that has a clever sharing mechanism that's easy to manage. There's basically an administrative style user. That user creates directory structures and shares them with people with a username and password. And what we have found is, that's what we're hoping to show. If you have time to download it and care to do the install, that's how quickly content can become available. And it's very quick to set up a brand new account. So I highly recommend it. And the workflows that we've been able to do alongside shared storage solutions that are on-prem for the in Avid Interplay or those types of things, we're able to show a way to extend the value of the current investment and reduce friction on file delivery and content viewing by and the solutions that allow for access into your on-premise shared storage, that is limited by your network speeds at that location. If you need to service 20 people, all of them need to gain access to your shared storage on-prem. That means you've got to have enough bandwidth to make those files available to those people times 20. Whereas we push the file using Lucid Link, you push the file once into your compatible cloud storage location, and then the bandwidth limitation is now between the client user and the cloud provider. And the cloud providers obviously are designed to feed what I assume they would call infinite, but we definitely aren't going to hit it, their bandwidth limitations. So pretty simple demo, but shows both.
I just wanted to highlight that we would love to open it up to questions now. If anybody has any questions or thoughts, if anybody, I'm hearing from some of our folks out in California that they said they were able to play the file over here in the West Coast just fine. Looks like that person's got about 300 megabits per second down and about 20 megabits per second up. Richie, we had another anonymous attendee here that said they tried DNX, HR, LB proxies in Avid, found that the JKL controls and basic playback were fine, but the mouse scrubbing and trimming were very laggy. Internet is about 150 megabits per second down. Is that just a symptom of the system? Can you talk a little bit about that?
I'm a sales guy, Scott. You're killing me. No, the mechanics behind the mechanics behind playback. My question would be from a debugging is if you were to copy that file local, does it play as expected? The word proxy can mean a lot of things. It's the concept of how much bit rate the file is based on its frame size. It may still be too high, and I can't speak directly to that, but maybe we could take that offline. I'd be glad to help debug what that issue might be.
Yeah, I think it basically it comes down to tuning, and there's a lot of parameters that can be tuned. And basically, what we want to do is we want to get the bit rate in line with what the internet connection is enabling, and typically we find that we can do those. And we've had folks that have had internet connections, as fast as a gig and as slow as 5 or 10 megabits per second. And it really just depends on the size of the file, the bit rate, depending on the format and everything else. So I would say that is probably just a symptom of the system and a little bit of thing that needs to take place in order to get that to work just fine.
That does bring up a good point. In Adobe Premiere Pro, there is one setting, and this is covered in the frequently asked questions or the the support mechanisms inside of Lucid Link. But there is one setting that's key for performance. You want to disable automatic audio waveform generation as a preference in Adobe Premiere Pro. That will save some lag of downloading the video to create this audio waveform, which in most cases is not being used as a primary need. So it adds unnecessary load to the system without adding a lot of benefit. So that is one thing that if you're going to use Lucid Link with Adobe Premiere, definitely want to disable or unclick that preference, automatic waveform generation. That'll give you a better experience. It's things like that, application level, devil's in the details, and I think that's one of the areas where partners like Bridge Digital add value, and you know, we work through the issues. So.
And there's a couple of components to this that is probably also important to clarify. We have one question around local caching. So the way Lucid Link is distinct from other solutions in terms of how we use our cache is our cache is really meant to be a landing place for the data that comes from the file or is going up to the file. So the cache is tunable. And what happens is if you're going to put a file up into Lucid Link, it immediately goes to your disk cache first. And then from there, it gets uploaded to the cloud storage in the back end. If you're pulling data down from the cloud, it lands in the cache and is used locally in the cache. So if editing something that you just downloaded and is still in your cache, it's going to feel like a local experience because it is local. That the data that you're editing is locally accessed in the cache. Once you make changes, those changes then get propagated up to the authoritative copy, which is in the object store. Let's see here. I wanted to see if we had some other questions. Just going through this. Okay. And when you use that cache, it's important to note that it is still streaming the data back and forth on the back end. So either way, the data is streaming a block at a time on demand to and from the object store. We've got some information in the web chat for those of you that would like to follow up with Richie at a later date. He's put his Calendly in there, so feel free to follow up with him and find more time to answer any questions that you may have about his usage. Are there any other questions? I got a couple more questions here, Richie. Looks like somebody was scrubbing around with a file. You said it was a little laggy at first, but then gradually got much smoother. Again, probably just related to the bit rate and the internet. Could I replace something like Aspera with Lucid Link? Yeah, a lot of the solutions out there, as I mentioned earlier, are really designed to try and move data faster, right? Because the point is when you save a file to the object store, you're typically saving it in a one-to-one relationship. One file is one object. So if I'm going to edit that file with Adobe Premiere Pro, I've got to pull that whole file down before I can make the edits and push the whole file back up. And so using something like Aspera to try and move data around faster is typically what a lot of people will do to collaborate and share files. But with Lucid Link, you really don't need that, because with Lucid Link, when we save the file into a lot of different blocks, we can then stream those blocks on demand as the file requires it. So you no longer need something like an Aspera or a Signiant in order to move data around faster. Anything to add there, Richie?
No, I think it's a great use case. Just the ability to quickly create a share and provide a place for someone to download and pull content from, and they can verify. There's a lot of reasons to us that in the past we've used Aspera, but we're definitely recommending to use Lucid Link going forward. I know the Aspera support contract is fairly hefty, and in my opinion, it's a better solution with a better cost. So.
All right. Well, I think we are out of questions at this point. I want to thank everybody for coming. This has been a lot of fun. Hope you've gotten a lot out of this. I hope you've enjoyed it. Please feel free to follow up with us if you have any questions.